What is up, everyone? I need to apologize for the lack of episodes in the last few weeks. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I've been on the road for the last couple weeks, and a couple weeks before that was kind of a rat race trying to get everything ready for the trip. I don't even know what episode number this is. I've recorded a handful of the podcast of the Century episodes while I was on the road with my Toyota Century. I didn't get as many done as I really wanted to. I really had these grand ideas to get, a dozen or more of those podcast series shorts recorded on the road, but I should have known that the road is usually pretty chaotic and I didn't get to as many as I wanted to. So if I'd spoken with you about recording one while either in Ocean City or in Chattanooga, Tennessee, or even in points in between, and we didn't get a chance to, I hope that we can someday soon. I know we're coming up into the winter here in the Northeast, so all the cars are going to be getting put away. It's that time of year again. It's such a weird, bittersweet time of year because October is my favorite month here in the Northeast. I mean, the humidity's gone. It's getting cooler in the mornings and in the evenings, aside from it getting darker earlier in the evenings. But the leaves are changing. It's super, super pretty. The Northeast has a beautiful aesthetic in October, but it's just the precursor to our 5 to even sometimes 6 months worth of winter. And up here in middle New Hampshire, we get served pretty hard, harder than even points south of here, like Boston, a couple hours south, seem to sometimes not get it as badly as we do. So that's kind of the bittersweet aspect of October. The days are shorter, unfortunately, but I feel like every year I try to cram in so much stuff into October, but also try to take a step back and just kind of enjoy the scenery and the weather while we have it. As we speak, it's mid-October now, and it's been pouring rain all day today here. And that's kind of what you fear in October, because as it gets colder and the leaves are changing, all it takes is a couple pretty good storms of heavy winds and heavy rain, and it takes all the leaves down, and then you're left with the November landscape look of the Northeast, which is barren, void of vegetation, and ready for the frozen tundra to creep in. So the last couple of weeks, though, have been amazing. And this episode is basically to just get back in touch with you guys and just kind of give you an update of the trip. If you follow me on Instagram, again, you probably saw all the stories and all the posts and all the sharing of other people's posts. It was awesome. So awesome to have the Toyota Century in Ocean City, Maryland, and again down in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was stressing the trip pretty hard because I knew that hauling the Century in my 24-foot enclosed trailer was going to be quite a task for my 93 OBS Ford, which is a naturally aspirated 7.3 diesel. It's a manual, but no turbo. And as most of you know, I hauled my Corvair home from Chattanooga, Tennessee in the 24-foot trailer with this truck back when I first purchased the truck down there. And I knew that it was going to be a long haul because my Century is probably, if not more, twice as heavy as my Corvair. So it's just putting that truck right to work. So leading up to the trip, I didn't only have a lot to finish on the Century to get that ready for the different shows, but I had a lot of maintenance to do on my truck as well. So that was kind of putting a lot of pressure on me. I was having a lot of issues with my glow plugs, and it wasn't just the glow plugs in the truck. It was my glow plug relay and the glow plug relay solenoid. I had grounding issues. I had key power issues. So basically the first hurdle I had to cross twice, or that I had to jump over twice, was I knew the truck needed glow plugs, or at least I had been told that from the previous owner. And what I did was I diagnosed the solenoid on the relay, and the solenoid was not getting a constant ground when the key was on. The key was supposed to close the ground circuit. And so without going into a ton of monotonous details about that, I basically did a new glow plug relay solenoid, and the truck started great for like 2 days. And what I didn't realize was there was an issue with the relay. In that particular year truck, it had this weird solid state relay base with a solenoid actuator on top. This was before they went to the Power Stroke. This is the IDI 7.3 diesel. So again, without going into too much boring car talk, it was leaving, when the key was on and the truck was on, it was leaving the glow plugs on too. So it shorted them out, but also caused them to swell. So after a couple of days, it wouldn't start again in the morning. I re-diagged everything and realized that when the key was on and the truck was on, the ground or the circuit stayed closed and kept power to the glow plug. So then I tested each glow plug. They were all bad. And not only did they have to all come out again, which involved taking everything on top of the motor off. And the first time around was the longest because I uninstalled and basically took all the bank sidewinder turbo setup stuff out of the truck and converted it back to an NA or naturally aspirated truck. So that took a bit of time too, because I had to locate a local friend who had an NA 7.3 truck, and he let me borrow all of his naturally aspirated factory parts for that motor, because now that mine had an aftermarket bank sidewinder turbo setup, it didn't have the factory air intake or the factory air filter or a couple catch cans and breathers and all sorts of different things that you kind of needed to replace when you took the turbo out of mine. So I got all that done, and all that stuff had to come out to even get to the rear glow plugs. So I realized that the glow plugs were bad this second time around, but they had swollen and they were stuck inside the motor. So it was another task just getting those things out. And what I was hoping was only going to be like an hour project turned into a full day. Then it turned into a day and a half with sourcing parts. And so this was right down to like the last few days before we left. So before that, I was flat out with the Century. And if you're listening to this episode on Spotify or iTunes or basically not watching it on YouTube, if you go to my YouTube, I did my best to post as many preparation episodes for this trip as I could. So there are a few. Once we get down to the wire, like the last week of preparation, I didn't even bother filming anything for YouTube because it just wasn't worth it. It takes so long to set everything up and, right down to making sure your batteries are charged, SD cards are formatted and open and ready, and setting each shot up, describing what you're doing and talking about everything. And honestly, I didn't even know if the time I had left before we were actually leaving was enough time to get everything done when you're focusing solely on that. So there's a lot of preparation work I did not film or document, and I'm okay with it because it was a race to the finish, or a photo finish, I should say. I got all the cold start ignition stuff done in the truck. That worked awesome. I had front brake hoses show up because the hoses on my truck were pretty dry cracked, or dry rotted, I should say. And so they weren't leaking, but I didn't want to risk a power stop or a panic stop on the road and blow one of those open. So I did new ones. And then obviously while doing those, the brake hard lines that won't go to it were old and brittle, and trying to loosen up the hose snapped the hard lines off. So that turned into more hours of that project, making a new front brake line, because from one wheel, another hard line connects over to the other side. So it was just a lot. It was a lot. And before the focus was 100% on my truck, I was getting the Century transformed more into what I've always wanted it transformed into. Unfortunately, because of 2020 and work being so slow, I didn't dare spend any money that I didn't need to spend. So therefore, I didn't really get a chance to dive into the Century project the way I really wanted to. There was so many aftermarket or period correct OEM and JDM components from Japan I wanted for that Century. And I could have been searching and sourcing all that stuff and purchasing and having the stuff show up in time for Ocean City. But again, I was just too nervous. I didn't know what this whole pandemic thing was going to do by this fall. I didn't know what my workflow was going to look like. I was too stubborn to file for any government help this year. I didn't file for unemployment. I didn't file for any sole proprietor grants, self-employer grants, all stuff that I was actually eligible for. I didn't take the time to read any of that stuff. And when I looked at some of the SBA grant forms online, it all was kind of scary. And I'm like, no, I'm going to ride it out. I'm going to pave my own path. And I think in 2021, I'm going to be grateful I did, just in case they pump any more fine print into some of these things where you're going to be taxed in different areas where you didn't think you'd be taxed or whatever. So that being said, I wasn't sitting on a pile of like government awarded money basically. So that was a big bummer because I wasn't sure if I was going to own that Century for more than a year. I mean, I'd love to own that car forever. But since I'm self-employed and since the laser cutting and laser engraving merchandising business, or the tier of that business I'm on right now, seems to be so sporadic, I should say, buying and selling cars are a part of my supplemented income. So since the Corvair, my 700, and my unfinished 52 Chevy are projects that I've undertaken with my father, in my opinion, those cars are not for sale. So all the cars I've been buying and selling are kind of my own projects that, maybe my father helps me out on a few pieces here and there. If we're both in the shop, we're both kind of tinkering. But those other projects we like hammered out together, like projects that I probably would not have, more than likely not have taken on without his help or his endorsement, I should say. So the Lada, my Derby before that, the Volkswagen Derby, the Lada, the 7 Series, now the Century, all those have been kind of like my own personal projects. And those are the ones that I've justified selling and luckily profiting on, and then buying other projects with that. So I always thought that I would get into the point or into the position where I would unfortunately have to sell the Century. This year I thought was just that scenario, simply because work was so slow. People weren't spending money, or at least companies weren't. They weren't spending a lot of money on their merchandise lines anymore. And I didn't really dive down the rabbit hole of making like COVID signs and stuff for people, like social distancing signs and all stuff like that. I didn't really get into that realm too much. I honestly didn't know how long that was going to be sustainable. And yet here we are. So that being said, coming back full circle, I did get a little brave spending some money on the Century right before we left for Ocean City. So I wanted to get rid of the 17-inch Desmond versus the wheels that were on the car. I really wanted to move up to 18s. And I wanted a Japanese wheel. I wanted a wheel that was period correct to the car. All the other aesthetic bits I want to do to the car are just that. They're original equipment from Japan. And so the wheels, I really wanted to fit that bill as well. So I was lucky enough to find a set of 1997 work VSX9s in 18s. And not only are they Japanese, that specific set of wheels came from Japan, or that they're necessarily period correct to the car, but they were a design that I kind of sought for the car as well. So the VSX9s kind of emulate like a BBS LM wheel. And to be honest, I'd rather, like, that's my dream wheel for that car. And going back to the whole spending money this year, 18-inch or larger BBS LMs are thousands of dollars for the most part, unless you get real lucky. So with only, a month to go before Ocean City, I decided to pull the trigger on these works, and I completely refurbished them. I stripped them down, sent the faces out to get powder coated, polished all the original bolts, got new lips, not just to have brand new aesthetic, like brand new mirror shined lips without any curb rash, but also adjusted their offsets and their widths. I went a little bit wider on the fronts and the rears. So all that came together. I did a lot of suspension modifications, some stuff that I've never really finished, and some stuff that I wanted to alter to gain ride quality and different ride heights and whatnot. So we hit the road. Basically everything was all done for the most part. Everything was ready to go. Kyron Burnt, a friend of mine who was on the TGC America Tour trip when we actually got the Century. He was on the westbound part of the trip with Corey and I from New Hampshire to Los Angeles. Kyron flew in from LA for this trip. He shoots for Speed Hunters, and he's got his own photography consulting business as well. But he was basically utilizing this trip and the different shows we were going to and the people we were going to see on the road to shoot articles for Speed Hunters. And indeed, he was actually documenting our trip personally on Speed Hunters as well, which the first couple articles of that trip are live right now on thespeedhunters.com. So Kyron flew in from LA. We met up super early at we left here at 1 a.m. on Wednesday morning. We met up with Corey and Ryan in Londonderry, which is about an hour south of me. And so it was about 2 a.m. at that point, and we hit the long, slow road to Ocean City. And my OBS is, man, like 40, 45 miles an hour in third gear with my foot to the floor in the hills. So definitely record slow time for getting to Ocean City out of the 10 or 11 years that I've been going there. But we got there, no issues, no problems. Super grateful for that. As most of you may know, if you've got your finger on the automotive pulse, this year in Ocean City was the craziest that the police have ever been. I mean, and this is coming from someone who's been there for over a decade and I've never had any issues with the police. I've gotten small tickets here and there for not having my valid plate on my car, having like a Euro plate on the car, or not wearing a seatbelt, just silly things. But they were impounding bone stock cars for like fickle things, like just tint or aftermarket wheels, like literally insane stuff. And I'll say it right here for the record, it's wrong. Like it's not right. It's wrong. I support, I've got plenty of friends in law enforcement, and I know a lot of really good people that are in law enforcement. I come from a small town in New Hampshire. I'm on first name base. I have always been on first name basis with all of my police chiefs. I don't have a record. I've never been in any sort of trouble, but I support my local law enforcement. They're good guys. You get, there's some really bad people out there too that have badges. There's no two ways about that. But diluting all that away, what they're doing in Ocean City right now is wrong. It's wrong. They are making up their own laws. The tow companies that are getting involved in this are just as to blame. Like it's wrong what they're doing too. They're basically, if you don't know anything about what's going on, basically, there's been a car show in Ocean City for 20 years. It was a Volkswagen and Audi show, and it bailed out years ago, but people continue to come to Ocean City. And I'm one of those people. It's just an awesome area to cruise your car. They do hot rod cruising weeks there, and they do bike weeks and all sorts of stuff. So it's a great area to just go cruise your car. It's got a 10-mile or so long strip, and there's a bayside, there's an ocean side. You got a boardwalk, you get the beach, you got seafood. It's just kind of a cool environment. But as the years have gone on, more and more crazy cars and crazy kids have showed up. So there's a lot more riffraff that show up. And so the police each year seem to always kind of like put the hammer down a little bit harder than it did the year before. And it's clear that in the next years, one after another, there's more pushback to that too. So one could argue that maybe if the police relaxed a little bit, you maybe wouldn't get so much pushback or this mob mentality of just kind of like lashing out. Kids are partying, kids are doing burnouts. You're going to have that in any large group of people, that are into cars. But this year was a whole different animal. And what they were doing was they were basically charging $1,000 for an impound, and they were impounding cars for window tint and basically any infraction. Like if you got stopped for anything, they impounded your car, and it was $1,000. And in years past, if you get your car impounded for reckless driving or faulty equipment or whatever, you basically just had to get a truck and trailer and go to the impound lot at the police station to get your car out. And there was like a fee, I don't remember how much it was. It wasn't much, but you could go get your car like with your own truck and trailer. This year, they put an end to that. And you actually had to have a tow company take your car back out of impound and take into your condo or wherever you were staying. The tow companies were charging an extra $300 or more to do just that. So they were charging $1,000 to impound your car, say if it had aftermarket tint. And then you had to pay that same towing company sometimes without even unhooking your car once it got to the impound lot, another $300 to then basically make a U-turn and go back to wherever they had just come from. And it's wrong. And there's been a lot of people on Facebook and on the internet that are either in law or know people who practice law. And a lot of people seem to be getting involved in trying to take Ocean City down or take them on for what they're doing, which is awesome. And I wholeheartedly support that notion because it's wrong. They can't do it. They're just making up laws and they're just enforcing crazy stuff for no reason. I didn't have any issues this year. I was a little nervous because the Century has dark tint. That's all factory stuff. But, when you're talking to some part-time police officer who, rides a bike on the boardwalk, usually making sure, I don't know, making sure nobody pulls onto the boardwalk with a car or something. Now that guy's roadside trying to tell you what is or is not factory equipment on your car and impounding you and costing you $1,200. It's just not right. So without making this whole episode about that, that was like a major bummer part of this year in Ocean City, because I know a lot of people personally that were getting their cars impounded for literally nothing, like nothing at all. And luckily the Century didn't get bothered. I think that car looked a little bit more, presidential and motorcade-ish. And I think everyone that kind of saw that car cruising, I think they were just trying to figure out what it was rather than what can we impound this thing for. So no issues. And I'm grateful for that because it looked like everybody was having issues. So I'm not sure if I'm going to return next year, which is weird to say because this is something I've been doing since 2009 and I really enjoy it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Ocean City with some of these legal actions that a lot of people are trying to take on, head on with Ocean City. So maybe some things will change by next year. Maybe passions will cool and things will be different by then. So we'll see. But after Ocean City, we made the long haul down to Chattanooga, Tennessee. I should say, actually, before I move on to Chattanooga, in Ocean City, it was awesome because we were able to meet up and shoot with my friend Chris Petruccio, who goes by Crispy on Instagram with a K. Phenomenal videographer. And we've worked on some stuff in the past together, but it was really cool to kind of do something exclusive with the Century. So really excited to see his upcoming unofficial H2O video. But we also were able to shoot with Anthony Purcell, who's another good friend of mine, who is a phenomenal video producer as well. He brought his gear down solely to shoot the Century. And basically, he usually does an Ocean City video every year, but this year decided to just shoot like a car feature of my Century. So we did that with him Sunday. But he also helped me shoot the intro to my Podcast of the Century miniseries. So what I really was envisioning for that was each episode, like having like the same intro for each episode, but a cinematic intro. So he helped me shoot some rolling shots of the Century on the strip, lots of interior details, especially the back seat where the podcast is actually being held. So we haven't finished that part of the production yet, but he helped film all that stuff. I am in the process of trying to write a synthwave soundtrack song to that intro because I really want the entire podcast series to be 100% me, with the exception of Anthony filming the actual shots of the Century. But the Century's mine. All the modifications I've made to it have been mine. And even the music you hear at the beginning of the episodes is mine. And it's been quite a challenge because although I've been a musician my whole life, synthwave is not a style of music I've ever written. So it's been a learning curve to take this on, not just because it's a style of music or genre of music out of my wheelhouse, but I don't really write and record music as often as I used to anyway. So it's been trying to dust off the cobwebs of just being artistic with music and getting those juices flowing again, sort of say, like sort of getting into that headspace of music creation and composing. So that's kind of stacked up on me, both dealing with that and writing like 100% electronically in my music building programs, without my guitar, without my drums, without my voice. And so that's been super challenging, but I've got a few pieces that I'm pretty stoked on that need quite a bit of critiquing. So I'm hoping to get all that finished up in the next week or two, and I can get that to Anthony, and I can finally get you guys the Podcast of the Century episodes that we've been filming. I haven't decided how I'm going to release that stuff. I've been talking and blowing a lot of smoke about starting a Patreon, and I thought this was a perfect opportunity to have like an entry-level tier as a Patreon and have like the Podcast of the Century episodes be solely and exclusively available on that platform. But I haven't decided yet, mostly because I haven't recorded as many episodes that I really wanted to. So as we speak, I really only have four Podcasts of the Century episodes recorded. So with winter coming up pretty fast, I'm hoping to record maybe 2 more Josh Garcia from Revival Motoring Podcast might come up next weekend to do his own shoot of the century before I put it away. And I might try to get the podcast set up in the car once more to get one recorded with him. But yeah, with winter coming up, it's going to be getting put away for storage. And that'll be basically it for, 5 or 6 months. 6 months usually, November to May. So haven't decided yet. I don't want to start a Patreon and start some tier for that if I've only got like 5 or 6 episodes total. That wouldn't be able to sustain or last through the winter. So haven't decided about that yet, but really excited to get that done, get the intro finished, kind of see how that comes together and put together the actual episodes. Other than that, I'm kind of unwinding from the trip now. I know I kind of glazed over Riverside. We made the trip down to Chattanooga. The truck did okay. I had a few issues with the truck, window regulator and motor that I just replaced a few months prior in the driver's door, shat itself on the trip. And so in a gas station parking lot in Delaware, I've got my door card off and I'm redoing the whole window motor and regulator setup in that, which is a pain, but not that big of a deal. Got to Chattanooga, had an awesome time hanging out with Mason and Carly. They put the show on. They also put us up, which was awesome. Really appreciative to them for that. And I vended the show at the Governor's Club. So that went well. That went better than I was expecting. I don't vend too many shows, so I don't have enough under my belt to kind of gauge how I'll do in a certain area of the country or a certain time of the year. But all things considered, for 2020, it went well. Pretty happy. All the stuff I didn't sell that I had left over is now currently available on the TGC web store. And I actually made a post just a couple of days ago on Instagram about that. And so things have been flying off the shelf the last couple of days. If you're listening and you've purchased anything off the web store in the last couple of weeks, or especially the last couple of days, thank you so much. I'll be getting all those orders out here, hopefully by the end of the week. But if you haven't, on Spotify, there's a link in the description of this podcast, and on YouTube, there's also a link in the description of the video. If you're listening on any other platform that doesn't have links, if you go to thegovernorsclub.bigcartel.com, I've got all the new merch that didn't sell out. Some did, but I've got all the merch that didn't sell out available right now on the web store. So thank you guys so much for your support with all of that. I sold all of the Ocean City keyrings, which was awesome. Made 150 of those. Wasn't sure with the whole pandemic thing going on if enough people were going to show up in Ocean City to buy those, but it was just as crazy as years past. So really grateful for that. Like I said, Riverside went well. Got a chance to eat some Southern food, drink a lot of sweet tea. That was awesome. And it was really just a good couple weeks on the road. The icing on the cake was on the way home, on the long haul home. We split the drive up in Pennsylvania. Usually I stop in Harrisburg with the dually because it's such a long haul. Normally I can make the haul home from Chattanooga to New Hampshire in 20 hours. And with the dually in this heavy trailer with the heavy car in it, it's not the case. So Kyron, who was still with us at this point, had some work to do at Woodward East, which is the Woodward Extreme Sports Camp. If you skateboard, rollerblade, BMX, scooter, parkour, or even gymnastics, you know what Woodward is. I'm in my mid-30s, and it was a dream of mine to always go to Woodward, the main Woodward in Amish country near State College, Pennsylvania. But when I was riding BMX professionally, I had the honor of being a visiting pro at the Lake Owen Woodward, which is up in northern Wisconsin. So I had the opportunity to go to Woodward East, the original one in Pennsylvania, as well when I was riding full time, but I just never took the time to. I'd rather ride street when I was riding. If we were filming, I'd rather take that time or that travel budget money to go to LA or San Diego or, go to a city and ride. But that being said, I never did get a chance to go to the original Woodward, the one in Pennsylvania. So Kyron was going to get dropped off in Harrisburg when we stopped for the night to break the drive up. And he was shooting some stuff for Red Bull at Woodward. And Corey and I had our bikes with us because we were going to be on the road for 2 weeks, and we've been riding a ton this year. So I figured, well, we've got the trailer. We might as well just throw our bikes in there. And I'm glad we did, because Kyron was able to get us into Woodward for free for a couple days while he was there. So that was a huge, huge treat. It was an hour and a half easily out of the way. And by the time we got to Pennsylvania, that was the last thing. Adding another 3 hours ultimately to the drive was the last thing I wanted to do, and sit in that truck any longer than I had to. But once we got out there, it was just the best decision ever. It was awesome to get a chance to ride Woodward, not just ride Woodward East, or, the original Woodward, finally after all these years, but there was only like 2 small groups of people there. There's no campers. It's closed currently. It's their off season now anyway, but it was just a couple Red Bull guys, Kyron, Corey, and I, and then the Braille skateboard team. And I want to say there was probably like 6 or 7 of those guys, and that was it. And they were super welcoming. We stayed in the same house as them. We kind of hung out with them and filmed some things together. But for the most part, while Kyron was shooting Coco, who rides for Red Bull, Corey and I just had free run of the whole facility, the whole place. I mean, there's 20 separate skate parks at Woodward. Indoor, outdoor, concrete, wood. It's unbelievable. So again, not only to just be there, but to be there with the facility empty, for you to like just ride at your will, to ride whatever you want. You don't have to wait for kids to move on or anything like that. That was amazing. So we did film a ton. And I'm grateful that we've been riding a ton this year in 2020, because my body's used to riding again. And so I would have been really bummed out to go to Woodward and have not had ridden for a couple years and be all stiff and just kind of be more of a challenge to ride than it was this time around. So we filmed a lot. I'm a few YouTube episodes away from going live with that one. I still haven't edited that one yet, but I'm super excited about all the stuff we filmed. Corey learned a bunch of stuff too, and pulled some new tricks and whatnot. So that's going to be a really cool episode, and one that I'm really excited about. So after that, Kyron stayed with Coco. They went on to New York City to shoot some more stuff for Red Bull and Mercedes, I believe. And Corey and I hit the road home. We had a few issues with the truck on the way home. We had some brake issues, but we're able to limp the truck home. And here we are. And luckily I came home to some backed up work. So it felt pretty good to get home and have some work waiting for me. When you're self-employed, that's the best feeling in the world, when you've got some work ready and people are ready to give you their money. So as we speak, I'm actually in the middle of a job as we speak. It's about 9 o'clock at night. It's 7:30 at night. And so chiseling through some work, trying to chisel through the YouTube episodes. I really want to get back into the swing of the podcasts. I want to do one a week, and it's so difficult. I feel like it's super boring if I'm just recording them, if it's just me. I've gotten a little bit better about recording them solo as I sit here in my studio. The first few were just so hard, and I was I'd be talking, but my mind wouldn't be thinking about what I was saying. My mind would be thinking about the things a few steps ahead as to what I was going to say next, because there was no dynamics to the conversation. I didn't have anyone to talk to or, bounce ideas off of, or just conversation off of. So although I feel like I've gotten a little bit more comfortable doing solo podcasts, I still feel like I'm not interesting enough, like just through monologue, to keep putting out weekly podcasts. I'm going to do my best. If I don't have guests, I'd like to do my best to just pick a topic, maybe pick a story, maybe pick a time in my life to kind of expand on, and maybe you guys can correlate your own, your own experiences to whether or not they're specific car projects or trips I had on the road, things I encountered, things I learned, maybe even with music. Currently I am really, really, really motivated about getting back into music. I know this winter I really want to work on my 52 Chevy cab over with my dad. It's been 5 years since I've worked on that project. But aside from that, I'm really, really motivated to work on The Rising Sea, which is my music project. So really hoping to get into that. I could do some music podcasts, maybe talk about some of my biggest influences and kind of where my mindset is right now with music. But aside from that, I'm really just looking forward to trying to keep content coming out. Winters are always super, super difficult here. Not for my headspace. I mean, I suffer from cabin fever, but I don't ever really suffer from like a serious seasonal depression. That's a very real thing, and it definitely affects me, but it's simply because I'd much rather be somewhere warmer with friends and be doing things outside. So that being said, over the summer, I blew a lot of smoke about possibly going on like another coast to coast trip, but in my daily driver Volkswagen Jetta with my bike and my podcast gear. And I didn't end up doing it because the pandemic thing was still pretty serious and a lot of different states were locked down, or a lot of, it seemed weird to hit the road. But now that we've kind of like, things have kind of settled down a little bit and people have kind of gone back to a normal-ish type of life, depending on, what you do, obviously. I've been thinking more about that. And although the last 2 weeks on the road in my dually have beaten me up beyond belief, like I came home so tired, so exhausted. With the cold weather coming, and lack of podcast episodes stacked up to basically dilute through the winter months, I'm really thinking about hitting the road again, maybe in November in my Jetta. Just do some maintenance to my Jetta, get that thing running. The thing's running great, but just go over it and just make sure it's ready for a 6,000 or 7,000 mile trip, throughout maybe a month or a month and a half between the beginning of November and Christmas, basically. So I'm thinking about that. If you've made it this far into the episode, message me on Instagram, or I might even put a couple stories out on Instagram, kind of asking what people think, but let me know, like what part of the country you're in. I want to try to set up some sort of like show schedule for this trip. If I end up going out, all the way out west and then all the way down south, I'd love to record a ton of podcasts on this trip, but equally I'd love to, especially in the warm climate areas, I'd love to have like skate park meetups. I'm going to be bringing my bike. I'm going to be recording all the YouTube episodes. I'm going to document the whole trip. So it'd be awesome to, even if you skate, or even if you just don't ride BMX, to have these skate park meetups. And I'd love to find out like where you would like to see these meetups. Obviously if it's near your area, I'd probably be hitting, like Buffalo, New York, maybe Chicago. I want to get down through Iowa and Omaha. I want to do some podcast episodes with some friends through there, maybe climb back up into the Dakotas, hopefully make it out to California, come down through, Arizona, New Mexico. I want to hit Dallas, maybe on down to Florida for Turkey Rod Run by Thanksgiving time, maybe be in Florida by then. I don't know. I have no idea. I just, I suffer from wanderlust terribly. And when I'm home from the road, I get caught up on work and then I'm itching to get back out on the road. So maybe this November is when I do it. That way I'm both leaving and returning to the Northeast, not in the middle of winter. I really wouldn't want to deal with these ice storms and just terrible road conditions and whatnot, going through Pennsylvania in the Northeast. That's always a nightmare. So I think that's what it's going to be. I think November might be another cross-country trip and record some podcast episodes and meet up with a bunch of people at skate parks, record a bunch of YouTube episodes, and get a chance to hang out with all you guys. It's been a weird year, so I wouldn't mind ending it on the road and seeing a bunch of friends. So I think that's going to do it for this episode. This has just kind of been my thoughts on the last couple months and maybe the next couple months coming up. Yeah, that's 40 minutes. I feel like 40 minutes is a decent one for sitting here in my studio alone. But thank you guys so much. If I saw you or spoke with you or hung out with you in Ocean City or Chattanooga in the last few weeks, or even points in between, just know that I really appreciate not only your support, but just the time hanging out with you and talking about the Century or your car projects or things that you've heard on past podcast episodes. That means so much to me. I mean, some of you guys, came up to me at the TGC booth at Riverside talking about things you heard on past podcast episodes or something you saw on one of my YouTube episodes. This is all stuff that I've been burnt out on. It's stuff that takes up a ton of time, requires a lot of motivation and execution to get done, and has no ROI. I'm not receiving any money or monetized anything for the podcast or the YouTube stuff. So it's real easy to get burnt out on it because I feel like sometimes I'm just chasing the day where you do get paid for it and you almost miss the important stuff in between. And I want to be as organic as possible. I want to bring value to anyone who's watching this stuff or consuming it in any sort of way. And so I want to be as real as possible and document the stuff that I'm into as organically as possible. So it's real easy to get burnt out on that because it doesn't seem like it's worth it. Because time is money. It really is, especially when you're self-employed. I mean, my life right now is a rat race with business. So, you know, if when I wake up in the morning, I need to be trying to generate income. You know, the money isn't just coming in like when I was punching a time clock working for somebody else. So my mind and my mental headspace needs to be focused on generating business and generating income. So the YouTube and podcast stuff gets super stressful and super draining. But what I'm getting at is all you guys that brought up things that you saw or that motivated you or that inspired you in anything, any sort of content that I've put out serves as serious motivation to me. And you guys need to know that. I mean, I came home, I went into this trip burnt out, not wanting to do any of that stuff anymore. And I came home with a new fire under me, like super motivated. I hear all of your words, you know, if I'm talking to you, like I'm hearing the things you're saying and they weigh heavily on me. So I can't stress the importance of that enough. You guys mean a lot to me and your words do as well. So thank you so much. You guys are why I'm attempting to do any of this stuff. So thank you again to you guys. You can follow me on Instagram if you don't already, john.ludwick, JOHNLUDWICK. The Governor's Club, spelt out. The Rising Sea, spelt out. That's my music project. And my bread and butter, my laser business is Night Laser with a Z. And I don't keep up on that Instagram page as much as I should, but you can go there and kind of see the things that I make, the things that that keep food on my table, sort of say. But thank you guys so much for the support. Again, head to the TGC web store. The web store link is actually on the Governor's Club Instagram page, but I have a lot of leftover merchandise and things that I make personally with Night Laser that's available on the TGC web store right now. And more to come, more info on a possible cross-country trip coming up in November. I really want to make it happen. I don't want to keep blowing smoke about this. So thank you guys for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.